Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she celebrates Diwali, the Indian festival of lights, along the Ganges River in the town of Varanasi. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla stepped out of the small guest house into the narrow lane, and the city enveloped her immediately. Varanasi in the evening held a particular quality of light, soft and amber, filtering through the haze that always seemed to hover above the old city. It was Diwali, the festival of lights, and the air carried a gentle anticipation, a sense that something lovely was about to unfold, slowly and without hurry. The lane was barely wide enough for two people to pass comfortably. Buildings rose on either side, their walls painted in faded ochres and dusty pinks, with wooden balconies jutting out overhead. Strings of marigolds hung from doorways, bright orange against the weathered stone. A few clay oil lamps, diyas, had already been lit and placed on doorsteps, their small flames steady in the still air. Lyla walked slowly, letting the sounds of the neighborhood settle around her. Somewhere nearby, a woman was singing, her voice rising and falling in a melody Lyla didn't recognize but found soothing nonetheless. The scent of incense drifted from an open doorway, mingling with the smell of frying pakoras and the faint sweetness of jasmine. A bicycle bell chimed behind her, and she stepped aside to let a man pass, his bike loaded with baskets of flowers. He nodded his thanks, and she watched as he disappeared around a corner, the marigolds bouncing gently with each turn of the wheels. She had no particular destination in mind. That was part of the pleasure of being here, of wandering through these ancient lanes without a map or a plan. She simply wanted to be present for the evening, to see how the city transformed as Diwali unfolded. The lane opened into a slightly wider street, and here the activity increased. Shopkeepers were arranging their displays, setting out trays of sweets covered in silver leaf, neat rows of laddus, and barfis and jalebis glistening with syrup. A vendor was stringing up more lights, tiny bulbs in every color, looping them across the front of his shop. Children ran past, laughing, their hands already sticky with sweets. Lyla paused at a small shop selling diyas, hundreds of them arranged in careful pyramids. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman in a green sari, smiled at her. "For Diwali," she said, gesturing to the lamps, "very auspicious." Lyla selected 3 small clay lamps, simple and unglazed, their edges still rough from the potter's hands. The woman wrapped them in newspaper with care, tucking them into a paper bag. "You will light them tonight?" the woman asked. "Yes," Lyla said, "tonight." The woman's smile deepened. "Good, good. May they bring you light." Lyla continued on, the bag tucked under her arm. The street curved and descended, leading her deeper into the labyrinth of the old city. The houses here were older still, their wooden doors carved with intricate patterns, their windows covered with latticed screens. More diyas appeared, lining windowsills and balconies, their flames multiplying as dusk approached. She could hear the Ganges now, a low murmur beneath the city's sounds. The river was close, just beyond the next turn, and she felt herself drawn toward it, toward the open space and the long stretch of water. The lane spilled out onto one of the ghats, the broad stone steps that descended to the river. Lyla stood at the top for a moment, taking in the scene. The ghat was already busy, people settling in for the evening, spreading blankets, arranging offerings. More diyas lined the steps, hundreds of them, creating rivers of light that flowed down toward the water. The Ganges stretched wide and dark before her, its surface catching the last of the daylight. Boats moved slowly across it, their shapes silhouetted against the pale sky. On the far shore, the land was flat and empty, a stretch of sand and scrub that made the city on this side feel even more dense, even more alive. Lyla descended the steps slowly, her hand brushing the worn stone. The ghat was uneven in places, smoothed by centuries of footsteps and water. She found a spot halfway down, a place where the stone formed a natural seat, and she settled there, the bag with her diyas beside her. Around her, families were gathering. A woman arranged flowers in a brass plate, tucking in marigold petals and rose buds. Two young girls in bright lehengas chased each other down the steps, their bangles chiming. An old man sat cross-legged, his eyes closed, his lips moving in silent prayer. The light was changing now, the amber deepening to gold, then to a soft purple. The first stars appeared, faint pinpricks in the sky. Someone began to sing a bhajan, and others joined in, their voices blending into a gentle harmony. Lyla watched as a group of priests began to prepare for the evening aarti, the ritual of light that happened every night on the ghats, but tonight would be even more elaborate, more radiant. They set up large multi-tiered oil lamps, each tier holding dozens of wicks. They arranged bells and conches, incense holders and flower baskets, everything positioned with precision. A rickshaw puttered past on the lane above, its horn tooting cheerfully. Lyla smiled. The rickshaws here were constant companions, their drivers calling out, offering rides, navigating the narrow streets with impossible skill. She had taken several rides already during her time in Varanasi, each one an adventure of sorts, weaving through crowds and cows and motorbikes with equal nonchalance. As the darkness settled more fully, the diyas on the ghats seemed to multiply. It was as if each moment brought new flames into being, small persistent lights that refused to be diminished by the vastness of the night. The effect was mesmerizing, a constellation of earth-bound stars. Lyla unwrapped her own diyas and placed them on the step beside her. She would light them soon, when the aarti began, adding her small offering to the thousands of others. A boat glided past below, the boatman using a single oar to guide it through the current. He called up to the ghat, offering rides, and a few people waved him over. Lyla watched as they climbed down the steps and settled into the boat, rocking it gently as they found their seats. She thought she might take a boat ride later, after the aarti, when the river would be full of floating lights. For now she was content to sit and watch, to let the evening unfold at its own pace. A family settled near her, the mother spreading a cloth on the stone, the father unpacking a tiffin carrier. They had brought their dinner to the ghat, planning to eat while they watched the ceremony. The smell of dal and rice wafted over, homey and comforting. The children, a boy and a girl, were trying to light a sparkler, the boy holding the match while the girl held the stick, both giggling as they struggled to coordinate. Finally, the sparkler caught, showering golden sparks, and the children shrieked with delight. The parents smiled, the mother calling out gentle warnings to be careful, to keep the sparkler away from their clothes. The priests were ready now. They took their positions on a raised platform at the water's edge, each one holding a lamp. A conch shell sounded, its low note reverberating across the water, and the aarti began. The priests moved in unison, lifting the lamps, circling them in elaborate patterns. The flames drew arcs of light through the air, hypnotic and graceful. Bells rang, their sound bright and clear. Incense smoke rose in thick ribbons, carrying the scent of sandalwood and rose. Lyla lit her diyas, touching a match to each wick in turn. The flames caught, small and steady, and she cupped her hands around them for a moment, protecting them from any stray breeze. The singing grew louder, more voices joining in, the words in Sanskrit but the emotion universal. There was devotion in those voices, yes, but also joy, a celebration of light and life and the turning of another year. The river seemed to respond, its surface rippling with reflected flame. Every boat carried lights now, and every ghat along the curve of the city blazed. Varanasi was living up to its name tonight, the city of light, and Lyla felt grateful to be here, to witness this. The aarti continued for a long time, the priests never faltering in their movements, the lamps never dimming. When it finally concluded, the conch sounded again, 3 long notes, and then there was a moment of profound stillness, as if the entire city paused to catch its breath. Then, gradually the sounds returned, conversations resumed, children laughed, boats began to move again. The evening shifted into its next phase, quieter now, but no less luminous. Lyla stood and stretched, her legs slightly stiff from sitting. She gathered her bag and descended the remaining steps to the water's edge. Several boats were waiting, the boatman calling softly, inviting passengers. She chose one, a wooden boat painted blue, with cushions arranged along the bottom. The boatman, a middle-aged man with a kind face and a woolen shawl around his shoulders, helped her step in. "Where would you like to go?" he asked in English, his accent musical. "Just along the river," Lyla said, settling onto a cushion, "wherever feels right." He nodded, pleased with this answer, and pushed off from the ghat with his oar. The boat rocked gently, finding its balance, and then they were gliding across the water. The perspective changed immediately. From the ghat, Lyla had been part of the scene, immersed in it. From the boat she could see it all, the entire sweep of the city, rising from the river, tier upon tier of buildings and temples and ghats, all outlined in light. The boatman rowed with smooth, economical strokes, guiding them parallel to the shore. They passed other boats, some carrying families, others with solitary passengers like herself. Everyone was quiet, absorbed in the beauty of the evening. "Diwali is special here," the boatman said after a while, his voice barely above the sound of water lapping against the hull. "Every year I think it cannot be more beautiful than last year, but every year I am wrong." Lyla smiled. "It's extraordinary." "You are visiting from far away?" "Yes," she said, "very far." He nodded, asking nothing more, respecting her privacy. They drifted in companionable silence. The city scrolled past. Each ghat had its own character, its own collection of buildings and shrines. Some were crowded with people, others nearly empty. All were illuminated, diyas and candles and strings of lights creating layers of radiance. Lyla noticed the sounds carried differently on the water. She could hear snippets of conversation, snatches of music, the distant clang of bells. But everything was softened, blurred by distance and the gentle movement of the boat. Above, the sky had deepened to full night, and the stars were bright now, competing with the earthly lights below. A sliver of moon hung low on the horizon, barely more than a suggestion. They passed a ghat where a group of musicians had gathered, playing tabla and harmonium, their music floating across the water. The rhythm was complex but soothing, a pattern that repeated and varied, inviting the listener to follow but never demanding it. Lyla let her hand trail in the water. It was cool but not cold, silky against her fingers. She thought about all the people who had trailed their hands in this same river, across how many centuries, how many lives. The river held all of it, every prayer and offering, every moment of grief and joy, and simply kept flowing. The boatman turned them slightly, angling across the current, and they moved into a quieter stretch. Here, fewer boats passed, and the ghats were less crowded. It felt more intimate, as if they had slipped behind a curtain into a private space. A temple rose directly from the water's edge, its walls dark with age, its tower silhouetted against the sky. A single lamp burned in an alcove, and Lyla could just make out the figure of a deity draped in flowers. "That is very old," the boatman said, following her gaze. "Hundreds of years, maybe more. Nobody knows exactly." "Does anyone worship there now?" "Oh yes, every day. The river rises in the monsoon, and sometimes the temple floods. But still, people come." Lyla found this comforting, the idea of this persistence, this quiet continuation, despite the water and the years. They drifted on. The lights of the main ghats were behind them now, and ahead, the river curved, disappearing into darkness. But even here, there were small flickers, isolated diyas, placed on the steps of less visited ghats, offerings left for the river. The boatman began to sing, very softly, a melody that seemed made of the river itself, flowing and repetitive and infinitely patient. Lyla didn't ask him to translate the words. She simply listened, letting the song wash over her. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing. It could have been minutes or an hour since they'd left the gate. Lyla couldn't tell and didn't care. She was exactly where she wanted to be, suspended between water and sky, surrounded by light. Eventually, the boatman turned them back, guiding the boat in a wide arc. The current helped now, carrying them along. They approached the main ghats again, but from this angle, with the city lights spread before them like a jewel tapestry. More diyas were floating on the water now, small boats made of leaves and flowers, each one carrying a candle. They bobbed gently, moving with the current, creating paths of light across the dark surface. Some would make it far downriver, Lyla thought. Others would wash up on the banks. All of them were beautiful. The boatman steered them closer to these floating lights, and they passed through a small constellation of them, the flames wavering as the boat's wake disturbed them, then steadying again. "People make wishes," the boatman said. "They light the diya and set it on the water, and the river carries the wish." "What do you wish for?" Lyla asked. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "The same as everyone, I think. Health for my family, enough work, peace." He smiled. "Simple things." "The best things," Lyla said. They reached the ghat where she had started, and the boatman maneuvered the boat alongside the steps. He held it steady while she climbed out, finding her footing on the stone. "Thank you," she said. "That was lovely." "Come again tomorrow night," he said. "Diwali lasts for days. Each night is different." "I might do that," Lyla said, and she meant it. She climbed the steps slowly, looking back once to see the boatman pushing off again, heading out for another passenger. The boat looked small against the expanse of the river, but the light from its lamp was bright. At the top of the ghat, Lyla paused. The city was still very much awake, people still celebrating, but there was a different quality to the energy now. The peak had passed, and things were settling into a gentler rhythm. She decided to walk a different way back, exploring another set of lanes. She turned down a narrow alley, this one even more dimly lit, the buildings pressing close on either side. But diyas marked the way, placed every few feet, their light just enough to see by. The alley opened into a small square, and here, unexpectedly, she found a gathering. A group of women sat in a circle on the ground, their saris bright even in the dim light. They were singing, their voices blending in harmony, clapping in rhythm. In the center of the circle, someone had created a rangoli, an intricate pattern made of colored powder, its design visible only in pieces, illuminated by the diyas placed around its perimeter. Lyla stood at the edge, not wanting to intrude but reluctant to leave. One of the women noticed her and smiled, gesturing for her to come closer. Lyla hesitated, then stepped forward. "Sit, sit," the woman said, making room. Lyla sat, folding her legs beneath her. The women continued singing, and after a verse, one of them handed Lyla a small brass cup filled with chai, sweet and milky, and heavily spiced with cardamom. She sipped it slowly, the warmth spreading through her. The women asked her a few questions, where she was from, how long she was staying, but they didn't press. Mostly, they just included her in their circle, sharing the moment. When the song ended, they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then gradually the women began to stand, gathering their things, preparing to head home. They said their goodbyes to each other, touching each other's feet in respect, embracing. The woman who had invited Lyla to sit spoke to her again. "Happy Diwali," she said. "May you always find light." "Thank you," Lyla said. "Happy Diwali." She walked back through the lanes, the city quieter now, though nowhere near silent. People were still out, sitting on their doorsteps, chatting with neighbors. The smell of food was everywhere, rich and varied, each household preparing their own feast. When she reached her guest house, Lyla climbed the narrow stairs to the rooftop terrace. From here she could see across the jumble of buildings, across the Ganges, and up to the sky. The stars seemed very close, and the lights of the city spread out below like a reflection of them. She could still hear music, faint and far away. She could still smell incense. The festival would continue through the night and into the coming days, layered celebrations marking the triumph of light over darkness. Lyla sat on the low wall that edged the terrace, her feet dangling. She thought about the boatman's wishes, simple and profound. She thought about the women in the square, their easy inclusion of a stranger. She thought about the river, flowing on, carrying prayers and light, and the patient turning of time. The night air was cool now, a gentle breeze coming off the water. Lyla wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders and leaned back against the wall. Somewhere in the lanes below, a child laughed, a dog barked, a motorbike started up, its engine rough and then smoothing out. The ordinary sounds of a city, a life, continuing. Lyla closed her eyes for a moment, just listening. When she opened them again, a firework bloomed in the sky above the river, golden green, its light scattering across the water. More fireworks followed, sporadic and unhurried, each one a brief flower opening and fading. They weren't frantic or overwhelming, just occasional punctuations in the darkness, moments of extra brilliance in a night already full of light. Lyla watched them for a while, then let her gaze drift back to the city, to the layers of illumination that marked each home, each temple, each ghat. It was beautiful in a way that felt both ancient and immediate, as if she were witnessing something timeless that was also happening exactly now, exactly here. She thought she might stay up a bit longer, enjoying the coolness and the view. There was no hurry to go inside. The night was generous, offering its gifts freely. All she had to do was remain open to them, present and attentive, allowing the peace to settle as deeply as it wished. Another firework burst, this one purple and silver. Its reflection shimmered on the Ganges, then faded. The river flowed on, carrying the light, carrying the darkness, carrying everything with equal grace. Lyla took a slow breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, then released it just as slowly. She felt grateful for this evening, for this city, for the chance to be here on this particular night, when the whole world seemed to be celebrating illumination. The terrace was quiet except for the distant sounds of the city, a comfortable quiet, the kind that invited rest without demanding it. Lyla remained where she was, wrapped in her shawl, watching the lights, feeling the breeze, present in this moment that asked nothing of her except to be here, softly awake, gently attentive, at peace.